Hi guys, it's me again. I wanted to do the same thing today. I'm doing my makeup for the day and I just wanted to make another video and talk. I really appreciate the comments and the people who watched last time, so I thought I would talk a little bit more about my journey, which is a word I really don't like, but I guess that's the word. And I was thinking through what kind of order does it happen in, right? And for me, one of the biggest preparation steps for deciding to get pregnant was I had to lose weight. And I mentioned in my last video, I had bariatric surgery, which is a gastric sleeve is what I had. Now, when I say bariatric surgery, most people probably know a gastric bypass, which is a little bit different, and I'll talk about that. But I want to clarify at the beginning that I don't want to be like a weight loss inspiration type person. I was never particularly unhappy being fat. I was pretty into like fat positivity and I was still super cute. It was nothing like that. I never really had any thoughts about disliking it or believing the mostly lie that being fat is inherently unhealthy or anything like that. And so I won't take that sort of angle. I don't want like a before and after angle. I don't need to be told like I look so good or whatever, because I looked good before. This was purely something I did, I would say like 90% for the goal of getting pregnant. So I weighed, I think about 309 pounds when I eventually had my surgery, which put my BMI at like 48, I want to say. And there was a couple main concerns that I had with that. One is that fertility clinics usually have a BMI limit, with the caveat that BMI is stupid and I don't think it's a good measure of anything. They still exist and use that. So I had to be somewhat beholden to a BMI limit just because the doctors were going to be. So I was definitely well over that. And then in addition, I have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and that often ties in with being overweight as a main symptom, in addition to things like insulin resistance. So it can lend itself to it being harder to lose weight, to prediabetes and diabetes and things like that. And what I know is that being overweight tends to exacerbate the PCOS. So it was very likely that the larger I was, I would have a harder time conceiving because the two things were really interconnected. And I had honestly not tried a ton of ways to lose weight before, besides general, like you should eat healthy and exercise or whatever. It was harder for me to lose weight because of the PCOS, but I was not like a crash dieter or anything of that sort. My mother had gastric bypass a few years ago, so she was also larger, and she'd had it, and I'd seen that she had done really well, and it wasn't like the worst thing in the world that you could only eat a little bit of food or anything like that. So I started considering it, and then there were two things that made me really decide to go for it, that were a little bit more life focused than the pure conception piece. So I went on a trip with my grad school program to South Africa in early 2019. I was getting an MBA, and they had a program where you could work on a project for this other country during the semester, and then over spring break you went for about 8 days to visit the country. So we went to South Africa, and it was beautiful and awesome. And I had a great time. I just did notice there were things where I got tired easier or had a harder time, climbing up hills, fitting in things where they're in a country that's not necessarily designed for that. And I don't know, I feel like I never really had the experience before of being hindered by my weight. And I kind of felt it for the first time really there. And part of that is probably just that my entire adult life I've been bigger. I started getting fat probably in like 7th or 8th grade, I want to say, definitely by 8th grade. but somewhere in middle school, and then have just been that way my entire adult life, which is part of why I think it's never super bothered me, because it's just what I've always been used to, right? There was never a time where I like was skinny and now I'm not, and I know what that difference feels like. But I digress. So that trip made me think about it a little bit. And then I also went out to babysit my niece. So my sister lives in Alaska, and she has a daughter who is now 3, but would have been not quite 2 at the time. And my niece Serenity has some special needs. She has a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and so she eats purely off a G-tube and needs some special care. So she asked me to fly out to Alaska to watch Serenity while her and her husband went away for the weekend, because it's hard to find a babysitter that's trustworthy with the extra needs. And so I went out and got to spend all this great time with my niece. It went well, we had a great time, but I also just noticed not even chasing a little kid around, that part was fine, but like picking her up and things like that were difficult and awkward. And so I started having that thought. And so I ended up in March of that year just going for a consult with a bariatric surgeon, and they talked to me about the gastric sleeve. I had initially gone in thinking maybe the lap band, or there's something they can do that's like a temporary balloon that takes up parts of your stomach. And I was initially thinking those because they aren't permanent options in the same way like surgery is. And pretty quickly the doctor told me they don't actually recommend that in most cases. It's basically putting a foreign object into your body, and the success rate is a lot lower, the complication rate is a lot higher. So what he suggested was the gastric sleeve, and I am no scientist or expert here, but essentially the gastric bypass that most people have heard of involves like rerouting your intestines basically. So they turn your stomach into a tiny little pouch stomach, and then they have to reroute all of your intestines for some reason. And it's pretty invasive. And it has a couple more complications related to like malnutrition and trouble absorbing nutrients. But the gastric sleeve is kind of a milder version. So what they actually do is just remove a large portion of your stomach. So the way they explained it to me is that your stomach was on average about the size of an American football. And after the surgery, it's about the size of a banana. So they just take like 80% of your stomach out. Nothing gets rerouted or adjusted elsewhere. So it's just that. And it basically just means you can eat a lot less at a time. And so you do need to focus on getting your protein first and getting certain like healthy foods in, of course, and all that. But it's a little bit less invasive and a little bit less complicated than gastric bypass. And so I talked with them for a while. I talked with my doctor, my general practitioner, and my mom and some friends, and decided I wanted to do it. This part's kind of besides the point. I did have to pay out of pocket. My insurance through work does not have bariatric coverage. And so on one hand, that was crappy because I had to pay a lot of money out of pocket. I used money from my 401k to pay for it, is what I decided to do. But it was a large chunk. But there's some requirements insurance has that can make it take a while. So most insurances require a 6-month weight loss program to prove that you can follow directions and to lose a certain amount of weight beforehand. And when I self-pay, I didn't have to do that. So I actually went from my first appointment in early March of 2019 to having surgery in May of 2019. There was also a couple things that are probably sketchy. Like one of the insurance requirements is always a psych evaluation, just to make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. You don't have unrealistic expectations, all that good stuff. And they were straight up like, you don't have to do that. If you're going to give us a big check, we do not care. So I was like, okay, that's probably sketchy, but sure. So it was a pretty quick process for me. And I tend to do a lot of things just like, yeah, sure, let's do that. I'm not good at thinking for a long time about most things in the world, probably besides having a baby. So I decided to do that. I had surgery. I honestly have had like an extremely easy time compared to people because I'm in Facebook groups and things like that, just follow other people and get advice. And I've really had basically no complications. There's only 1 or 2 things that makes me not feel well to eat. I now cannot eat anything from McDonald's without feeling sick, and not even like a big burger and fries. Like, I once got a grilled chicken sandwich and ate just the patty, the grilled chicken itself, and it made me sick. So like, McDonald's is out. Too much white rice will make me sick. A couple things like that, but things that aren't good for you anyway. And other than that, it's really genuinely a portion thing. I can eat a fraction of what I used to, and that's now a little over a year out from surgery. I could eat much less at the start. So since I had surgery May 22nd of 2019, it is now early to mid-July of 2020. Do some math. I've lost about somewhere between like 130 and 135 pounds. So a good amount of weight. I'm much smaller. I'll put in a picture from before, with the caveat that it is just not meant to be like, look how bad I looked before and how good I look now. Not the premise. Really did it with one thing in mind, and it has been very successful for that. So my sugar levels that were elevated are normal. My thyroid levels that were elevated are normal. I have a somewhat regular period, which I never did before. So it did the physical things it was supposed to do. And you basically have to wait a year after having that type of surgery to get pregnant. So I've waited that year. And that's why I'm able to start looking into things now. So it really, I just can't emphasize enough. It was for this specific purpose, kind of because I had to, not because I did not like myself before, or I thought I looked bad, or I felt really bad, or anything like that. People still ask all the time, if I tell them about it, they're like, oh, do you feel so much better? And I don't honestly feel that much different. There's certainly a level of physical activity I can do a little more sustained, like just walking around things that I didn't necessarily notice before. And probably the other big difference in terms of how I feel is just going to be that I had, probably still have, sleep apnea. And I do notice that I sleep a lot better. I feel more rested after sleeping. So there are a couple things, but I don't have this like, my life is so completely different. I don't know. I'm just smaller. And I definitely am. I definitely still have like loose skin that you hear about, and don't worry about it too much. So it's sort of a unique perspective, because I feel like a lot of people are so obsessed with like, how do I look? Right? And I don't know, that just wasn't it for me. I just want to sustain it so that I can get pregnant and be healthy, but again, I in no way think that being fat means you're unhealthy. I had specific health issues that were exacerbated by my weight just because of the PCOS. I specifically had a reason that they were tied. They are not always tied for everybody. You can be skinny and be extremely unhealthy, and you can be really fat and be in perfect condition. So I don't want anyone to take it that way. I'm talking about this purely from the angle of, it was a decision I made because I knew that it would increase my chances of conception, that it would mean I could go through a fertility clinic, which I wanted to do, and that it might make me able to feel slightly better taking care of a kid. So those were my motivations, and it's been good. It's worked for that. I haven't had any complications. I mean, I won't lie. They're always like, oh, you look so good. You look so pretty. And sometimes I have those thoughts because it's like societally ingrained in us. But it's just not my point. I did it for a very specific reason. And I made sure to emphasize that to myself. So I haven't bought any baby things, right? I know some people like to go around early and start stocking up so that they can spend the money over time. And some people think that's really bad luck, which I don't know that I believe that either. I just haven't done it. But I did right before my surgery buy a single lovey. So one of those, it's like a tiny little blanket with a stuffed animal's head on top. So it's an elephant with like a little soft blanket attached. I bought a single lovey. because the surgery was really the first big step towards this that I was taking. And so I brought the Lovey with me on surgery day and had it with me in the outpatient room, and have brought it with me to various appointments and things like that, just so I could carry that through. It's like, here's the first big thing I did towards this, and then here's something that's been with me that I can give to a baby from that. So I tried to do that as like a kind of symbolic situation, but that's really about it. I've not even taken like true before and after pictures. I have pictures I can put next to each other, right? Like full body shots from before and full body shots from now, but I did not do any official ones or measurements or anything like that. So I haven't been like a true, I'm a weight loss person now. It just kind of happened, but it is getting me closer to my goal. And I wanted to talk about it early because it was a big step for me towards this goal of having a baby. I knew that it was something that was going to have to happen one way or the other to do that. It is 9 a.m. and I'm putting glitter on, but no one needs to worry about that. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. Like I said, I'll put in a before and after picture just because I know people get curious about that sort of thing. I would probably be mad if I was watching a video and they told me all about this and then didn't show me what it looked like. So I will put that in here. If you have any questions about bariatric surgery for pregnancy or anything like that, I'm happy to answer them. I always feel sort of bad because I've had so few complications that I feel like I give people the wrong idea, because there certainly are people who have a much harder time than I did and have food that makes them sick and inability to keep things down or to drink water and things like that. And I just really have barely had any issues. So I don't want to present like a false, yeah, it's so easy and everybody should do it, because that's certainly not the case. But I am happy to answer questions about my personal experience and what it's been like for me. Similar to conception, my age played a role. So a lot of people who get gastric sleeves and gastric bypasses are on the older side. And because I'm on the young end of the demographic at 28, I likely had a slightly easier time just because of that. So I am told, and that's sort of comparable to conception, right? I will probably have a slightly easier time than a lot of women do, just because age is on my side, so they say, about that whole thing. But I'm ultimately really happy with my decision. I think the only times I question it, please excuse my cat crying, the only times I question it, besides sometimes when I'm like, man, I really wish I could smash like a supersized fry, the only times are sort of more philosophical, where I almost feel bad about it, just because I have been and am very fat positive, and I don't think it's a bad thing, and doctors over recommend weight loss surgery. It is certainly not for everybody. Okay, we're back. We're ready for the day. I don't have anything else to say. I just don't think I could have ended the video without my makeup actually done. That would have made me uncomfortable, both as a viewer and as the person making the video. So I'm going to sign off for the day, go about my life with some Zoom calls and all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys watching. Like I said, I am happy to talk if anyone is thinking about getting bariatric surgery with PCOS or to try and conceive, or both. I'm happy to share my experience and about my doctor in the Atlanta area if you're here, because he was really great. So I'm looking forward to any conversations about that, and I will hopefully be back next week with another video about some step in this process. So thanks everybody. Have a good day.